Hi, I'm Kat Stefko, and I'm the Director of Special Collections and Archives, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation between Spencer Apollonio, Bowdoin class of 1955, and Jenny Lemoyne, the curator of the Peary-MacMillan Arctic Museum. Before we get going, I'd like to offer a few thanks. Specifically to Marika Vandersteenhoven, who is the Special Collections Education Outreach Librarian, as well as Jenny Lemoyne, Susan Kaplan, and Kim Noel Hobson of the Peary-MacMillan Arctic Museum for organizing today's events. This event is an opportunity for us to celebrate and explore the significance of Spencer's recent donation to the college of his field notebooks, correspondence, photographs, and other materials documenting his research in the North. I'd also like to thank Caroline Mosley, who is the college archivist, who has been working fast and furiously to arrange and describe his papers to make sure researchers have full access to this treasure trove of Arctic data. And last but not least, my gratitude to the Harold and Iris Chandler Lectureship Fund for sponsoring today's events. Before I get going, I wanted to also this is the shameless commerce part of the conversation. I wanted to put in a plug for a couple additional events that are coming up. So tomorrow at 4 p.m., I invite you to the panel Challenges and Choices, Rapid Change in the Arctic with Andrew Hartzik, class of 1995, who is the director of the Arctic program at Ocean Conservancy. I cannot say that word apparently. Conservancy. Susan Kaplan, professor of anthropology and director of the Peary-MacMillan Arctic Museum and Arctic Studies Center at Bowdoin, and Laura Henry, who's professor of government at Bowdoin. Their discussion and the Q&A to follow will explore the social and environmental challenges and choices in the contemporary Arctic. And then on Friday, May 7th at 12:30, the Special Collections Archives Library continues our monthly page turning of the John James Audubon Double Elephant Folio edition of Birds of America. And we will be joined in May by Peter Logan, who's class of 1975. Peter wrote a terrific biography of Audubon a few years back that focuses on his time in Labrador, and Peter will be returning to be our speaker in May to discuss a forthcoming article that he's recently written about Audubon. And I will put both of the links to those to register for those events in our chat in a moment. So now to turn to our speakers, it's my pleasure to introduce Spencer Apollonio, who is Bowdoin class of 1955. Spencer has been Commissioner of Maine's Department of Marine Resources, Chairman of the Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission, and Executive Director of the New England Regional Fisheries Management Council, among other things. A particular focus of Spencer's career is in marine life in the Arctic Ocean. And I understand that he developed this interest early, inspired in part by the work of his father, Howard, who had accompanied Donald McMillan on an expedition to North Greenland in 1938. As a student at Bowdoin, and this is quite stunning, by the way, because I'm the parent of an 18-year-old. So as a student at Bowdoin, Spencer spent his summers working as an assistant to the U.S. Weather Bureau in Greenland and Arctic Canada. So spending the summers after, I think, sophomore, junior, and a senior year there. After completing his master's degree at Yale at the age of 26, Spencer was tasked with leading a multinational joint research expedition to Devon Island in the Canadian Arctic. Spencer and his team established the island's research station there and studies its geophysical, glacial, archaeological, and biological characteristics. This was just one of some dozen Arctic research expeditions Spencer managed to take between a 30-year period ending in, I believe, 1986. Spencer has published numerous books and articles and held several lectureships, including the Talman Visiting Professorship of Environmental Studies at Bowdoin in 1976. Spencer will be joined in conversation with Jenny Lemoyne, who is the longtime serving curator at the Peary-MacMillan Arctic Museum. Jenny's an archaeologist whose Arctic fieldwork has taken her to many of the same places Spencer worked at in the Greenland and Canadian Arctic region. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Spencer and Jenny. Their conversation will be, we hope that a conversation that you will also participate in. So we're going to save ample time for your questions at the end of their conversation. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Yes, and welcome, Spencer. We're really excited, as Kat said, about the donation of your papers and photographs and journals and things like that. It's really an amazing contribution, I think, because what really amazes me is how you're a bridge, really, between Macmillan and current research in the Arctic. You span that whole time, and it really is has been a really amazing and remarkable career. When we first met, when you came by the museum, I don't know how many years ago, and I was excited to find someone who knew about true love and places like that. And so this is really, really a great opportunity for all of us to hear some of your stories about your work. So tell us a little bit. I mean, Kat referred to your early work in the Arctic. Tell us how you why you determined to do that, probably a pretty unusual job for an undergraduate in those days, and what drew you to it, and how it was to be up at Thule, which itself was pretty new. The air base was pretty new at that time.
Yeah, Thule Air Base was construction began in 1951, and the Weather Bureau had a weather station at Thule since 1947 in conjunction with Danes. And when the Air Force was established at Thule, they took over the weather observation, so the presence of the U.S. Weather Bureau was no longer needed. And the Weather Bureau sent a recruiter around to various colleges to recruit students to go north and help close down the U.S. Weather Bureau station at Thule and move the equipment to other stations. And they also sent some students to Resolute, which is in northern Canada also. So since Kat mentioned that my father had been north, I was 4 years old when he went to the Arctic in 1938. And I always had a memory of the first day's voyage from Camden to Bar Harbor on the Bowdoin in 1938. For some reason that stuck with me. So when the recruiters came from the Weather Bureau in 1952, I was very receptive. They didn't have to ask. I was ready and willing. And so I went in 52, and I went in 53 and 54. I think I may have been the only student to go 3 seasons on the student assistant program. And so that's how Bowdoin made it possible for me to go, because they hosted the recruiter, and I was ready and willing. So that's how that began.
Yeah, and I seem to remember that you met some pretty interesting people while you were there. I mean, it was a busy place in those days.
Well, I met a lot of interesting people on all of my, I really did. I mean, the first and foremost, of course, was Jack Crowell, who was in charge of the weather station in 1952. Okay. Jack lived on Kimball Island, next to Isla Ho on the main coast.
Spencer's speaking to us from Boothbay Harbor.
He became a good friend over the next 30 years because I kept running into him.
So I don't know if is it me or is the Jenny and Spencer frozen?
They are frozen.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for confirming, because sometimes my internet connection is pretty bad, but I think they are both frozen. So we're going to give them a moment. Oh, hi, Jenny. You're muted now.
I'm back. Our participants hopefully are still here. I've
Our participants are here, but I don't see Spencer, but let me,
Yeah. Or if you want to text Leslie.
Text Spencer? No way. Spencer does not do text. You need to call him on his phone.
Yeah, he's at Leslie Bird's house and we're texting her.
Oh, Leslie's doing it. Okay, I got it. All right.
okay, he's coming in now.
Oh, yeah,
Spencer
Leslie
is,
fixed it.
yep, there's Spencer.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Oh,
Oh.
Spencer, you're muted. Hang on a minute. Can we unmute him? Or does he have to do that?
I can ask him to unmute. I can't unmute him.
Yeah.
Spencer, could you please unmute? So it's just
Leslie,
like, this is actually a demonstration of the communication challenges in the Arctic, people. I just want you to understand what's happening here, a real live simulation.
okay.
Yeah, only the host could unmute him, but if not, you'll have to call Leslie back.
Yeah, and he's frozen again anyways.
Oh, good Lord, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is why Maine needs better broadband, I suppose. I mean, this is an issue, a broadband issue, I think. So hopefully they can join again.
He's still, his video is still going.
Hello, this is Guy Marchessault, who just joined.
Yeah, no, Spencer
Okay.
is not. It's
There.
not on.
Lizzie, can you unmute? There we go. We're back. Oh, no, you're still muted, Leslie.
There we go.
Yep, thank you.
How do we get rid of that stuff?
Thank you, Leslie.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll be more stable now.
Hey. I knew you could do it. Go close the door so I can show you. Okay. Good thing we have.
So you were
technicals.
talking about Jack Crowell.
Yes. Jack was a skipper of several schooners for Macmillan in the 1920s and the 1930s. He was in the Second World War, establishing Arctic air bases and weather stations. And after the war, he worked for the National Science Foundation, the Weather Bureau, the Army. He worked in the Antarctic. He developed two oceanographic research vessels for the National Science Foundation in the Antarctic, and he went on 2 trips to the Antarctic to locate sites for a research station on Palmer Peninsula in the Antarctic. So he was a pretty remarkable guy. And we, as I say, we were friends, good friends for 30 odd years. So
Yeah,
that was,
it's a great connection.
yeah.
And was it at Thule that you met Eigil Knuth?
Yes. Eigil Knut was a Danish count, and he spent many years in Greenland studying archaeological sites, primarily in Northeast Greenland, but elsewhere also. I chauffeured him around in Thule Air Base in 1953. We talked about me joining him on an expedition in 1954. That didn't happen. But he later wrote a popular report in Denmark in Danish about that trip. And years after that, I was able to translate it so I could read all about the expedition that he took in 1954. I have to tell you one story about Eigil Knut. I love this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, Johnny?
Oh, no.
You know, okay. He went to school with the Danish king. Being a Danish count, he was in the upper echelon, and he went to school with the Danish king. And occasionally he was invited to dinner at the palace with the king. And so, of course, he dressed accordingly in formal attire for the dinner with the king. And he was seen riding through the streets of Copenhagen on his way to the palace, dressed in his very formal attire on his bicycle.
That's very Danish.
He was a memorable man, a very personable man, very supportive man in every way.
Yeah. Yeah,
He was-
he's quite, certainly for archaeologists, he's quite a legend up there. Yeah.
Yeah, he was still doing archaeological work in Northeast Greenland when he was 90. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it gets into your blood, I guess. Yeah.
Memorable.
Yeah. And so obviously you liked that work that you did at the weather station well enough that you continued on.
Yeah.
And it started, and you started doing independent research, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
1956. While I was at Bowdoin and going north with the Bureau, I got interested in the possibility of doing science in the Arctic. I'd been a history major until that point, and I said, well, no, I'm not going to do any history in the Arctic, so I'll try to do some science. But at that time, my immediate thought was geology. But
Yeah.
because at that time, Bowdoin had no geology department. So my second choice was biology. And that's what led to my biological career in the Arctic. And so my first field research work was in 1956 at Resolute in the Canadian Arctic.
Yeah.
And then I went on from there to later work.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just bring up quickly, I have a map, just because I think people aren't necessarily going to know where all these places are.
No,
So
that's not a map.
so here's Resolute Bay.
Yeah.
And then, so you did your research there. And then was it right after that you went to True Love? Was that your next project, or oh no, you were on the ice island, which I couldn't put on the map. Where was, when you were on it? Well, tell people what the ice island research station was and where it was when you were on it.
Well, when I was on it, the ice island was drifting from the vicinity of Ward Hunt Island to where it says the Arctic Ocean.
So out here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right there. The ice island was called T3 because it was the third ice island discovered by radar targets on weather flights from Alaska to the North Pole. That was the third one discovered. It was occupied briefly in 1952, and then into National Geophysical Year, it was occupied again. And Jack Crowell was one of the people that helped to set up and establish the camp on the island in 1956. And I landed on the island in May of 1950. Did I say 56? 57. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so this is a picture of the camp, right?
That's the picture of the camp in the middle of the summer. You can see this considerable water on the surface of the island. The island was 150 feet thick. It was 9 miles long, 5 miles wide. And as I say, drifting all the time. In the summer, the snow melted on the surface. And so we got a lot of water all over the surface of the island. I lived in the little cabin that was in the lower, almost in the lower corner of the campsites there. And my research station was in the camp second from the left in the upper corner of the island. I was on the island for a little bit more than a year doing oceanographic work. I was hired by the Woodsole Oceanographic Institution because they had a contract with the National Science Foundation to do the oceanography. And I guess they were happy to hire me because I'm not sure too many other people wanted to spend a year on an ice island.
And so that, oh, go ahead.
Part of the, what was I going to say? But well, here you can see the impact. The oceanographic hole is in the lower foreground. We had to cut a hole through about 12 feet of ice, not through the island itself, not through 150 feet of ice island, but through about 12 or 15 feet of sea ice frozen next to the ice island. And in the summertime, all the meltwater like to run down through that hole, so we had to move the hut and the oceanographic winch to a different foundation, same hole but different foundation. And then we had, that's another problem that the had to deal with in the summertime. That particular tractor crushed through soft ice, and it was quite a job getting the tractor back out. That was not the only, but that was typical of the problems on the ice island. So we were to see winter come again and freeze things up. So we didn't put up with those problems.
So how many people were on the island when you were there?
There were about, in the summer, there were 23. 19 of those were Air Force people, heavy duty mechanics and cooks and radio operators and so forth. And there were 2 US Army ionosphere specialists. We were one of the first stations assigned to track Sputnik when the Russians launched it in the fall of '57. And there were 2 student geophysicists from Lamont Institution and me. And so there were about 5 of us doing science out of a total of 23.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big.
In the winter, there was only me doing science, plus the weatherman, plus the 2 ionosphere technicians.
Yeah, wow. So, and how long was that winter? Like, when did the main crew leave and return again?
Oh, the sun left or set for the last time in October, probably the 15th or 20th of October. And it returned over the horizon again in middle of February, early February.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it's a good long winter dark.
Yeah. But, in hindsight, it doesn't seem like a long, dark, gloomy period, because there was the moonlight, of course, which reflected from the snow, and there's the northern lights, which were reflected from the snow. And we had twilight, both in the fall and the spring. Yeah. So it wasn't total depressing darkness all that time.
No, I think that's one of the greatest myths of the Arctic, is the darkness in the.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and how long did T3, do you know how long T3 was in operation?
I don't. It was operated for a number of years after I left it. And then I think it just drifted in such a position that it was no longer profitable to operate a scientific station. They're very expensive, of course, with all the air support needed to run the station. And the profit margin just disappeared. And then, of course, eventually it broke up, as all of the ice islands did in the Arctic Ocean.
Right, yeah. So from there, you went and instigated, I guess, was it you who instigated the whole project to establish True Love Lowland Research Station?
Yes, I have to say it was me. One of the reasons was, at that time, of course, I was really hooked on Arctic marine biology, and I wanted to do some more. But I also felt that, there could be a better ratio of scientists to support personnel. I thought the ratio on T3, even though it required Air Force support, the ratio was rather small. So I proposed to the Arctic Institute that it established a station on Devon Island. It turns out, I went to Montreal to discuss it with them, and it turns out that the Institute had just decided to take on a large project of its own, but they hadn't decided what it wanted to do. So my proposal, which was fairly specific, landed at exactly the right place at the right time, fortunately. So they agreed to do it. They said, yeah, we'll do it, but we can't do it in 1959, the next year. So you do a small independent project in 59, and then we'll organize and set up the Devon Island Station in 1960. So in 1959, I went to Alert, which is the northernmost weather station in the world. And I went with a fellow named Dick Harrington, who was another remarkable person. Dick was my assistant. I have to tell you a bit of a story about Dick.
Yeah.
He was his father was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Dick was kind of, by inheritance, I guess, infected with the Arctic. Dick, after he worked for me, worked for the Canadian Wildlife Service, and one of his jobs, I'm told, was to climb into polar bear dens in the spring of the year to take a census of the polar bear cubs born during the winter before they exited in the spring of the year. That was one of the things he did, among others. Dick was later awarded the gold medal of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society for the work which he had done on paleontology in the Canadian Arctic. He's a remarkable guy, remarkable guy.
Yes. Yeah, and I think if I'll share the screen again, because I think there's a picture of him. I think this is him, is it? On
There he is. Dick is on the right.
Yeah.
The fellow on the left, Jeff Stewart, who lives in Victoria, British Columbia now.
Oh, yeah.
Dick lives outside of Ottawa, retired from the National Museum of Canada.
Yeah.
It's the edge of the Devon Island ice cap, by the way.
Oh, okay, right. Go up onto that ice
That
cap.
picture was taken on the first day that we were able to reach the edge of the Devon Island ice cap in 1960. That was
Oh, okay.
the first time we stood on it and found that it was feasible and practical to get up on the ice cap.
Ice cap, yeah, which is important, obviously, for research. So, oops, there's a, this is your photograph, I guess, of flying. You didn't fly into Devon, did you? That in 1960?
No. We went on a ship. No, this is a photograph from the Royal Canadian Air Force.
Oh, okay.
It's looking east along the north coast of Devon Island, almost in the middle of the picture. You can see a flat lowland there, mounted on the right there. That's called True Love Lowland. And that's where we decided we would set up the station. And then upper right, of course, you can see the edge of the ice cap, which occupies about a third or maybe 40% of Devon Island. Devon Island is about the size of New Brunswick. And so our intent was to set up the research station on True Love Lowland and then work from there for the 3 years that we planned the work.
So that was the intent, and this is, again, your photograph of arriving at True Love.
This is the evening of our arrival. This is one of the first landings from the ship that took us north from Quebec City.
Yeah, it doesn't look very hospitable, although I know it's a great
spot.
Well,
we had no idea in looking back about whether we were able to land on Devon Island, on True Love Lowland. All we knew about it was what we could see in the aerial photographs, and we never gave a thought to the possibility that maybe we couldn't land on the island. And what do we do then? Turn around, go back to Montreal, to Quebec City on the ship and say, that's enough. As it turned out, in spite of what you see in the picture, it was easy to land. The crew were able to shove the ice blocks away. And the one small beach where we could land all of our 60 tons of equipment on the shore. Just one small beach. So we were very lucky that, in fact, we did and could land on True Love Lowland. I must also, pardon me for going on and on, but we arrived on the ship on the afternoon, I think it was, of August 18th, 1960. And it was blowing 40 miles an hour. It was foggy and thick. And there was nothing the ship could do except you couldn't fly a helicopter, of course, in those conditions. And it just stood by waiting for conditions to improve. And the captain said to me, he said, if this doesn't clear up by midnight, I'm going to have to leave because I've got other commitments, which of course he did. And so I was sitting there for from afternoon until 11 o'clock at night saying, you know, we're going to leave. We're not going to be able to do it. At 11:30, the fog disappeared, the wind dropped, the sky cleared, the sun came out, and it was perfect conditions. And so we were able to start unloading before midnight, and the ship stood by us until it got all of our 60 tons ashore. And there we were.
Which was, and you had like
There
a
we
lot
are.
of, yeah.
That's it. That's about 3 o'clock in the morning of August 19th.
Yeah. You can see it looks like the fog is just waiting to come back in and close you off.
The fog never comes back in. It was sunny all the rest of the time.
Yeah, and so you'd intended to do, and I know there was a big science program, obviously, for this project. And did you intend it to go continuously for 3 years?
We hoped to.
Yeah.
We knew we were only going to be able to set up the station in 1960. We were going to go back in April of 1961, set up the station and begin the scientific program. And we hope to continue it for 3 years continuously. We were able to continue it from April 61 until September, early October of 1962. But at that point, the Institute ran out of money and they said, oh, you guys all got to come home because we just can't support the station anymore. But we were able to raise more money and went back in April of 63 and worked through September, October of 1963. And then to shut that program down, no more money.
Right, as always the problem with Arctic research. But the research station didn't, I mean, it didn't totally, was it used continuously in the summers after that, or?
Intermittently. I think the next summer, 64, it was not, but then it started to be used again in 65, I believe. Our glaciologist, Fritz Kerner, who'd been with us for 3 years, went back in 65. I think he took his wife with him and they spent the summer on the ice cap. I'm not sure what his wife thought about that, but he did. And then, of course, it was used again and the Institute was able to get more support and reopen the station, improve the physical facilities. It was one of 2 Arctic stations, Canadian Arctic stations, during the International Biological Program, when it had substantial improvements and a lot of people. And that led to your presence later on, Jenny, on the island. And the Institute,
Somewhere there.
until for 40 years, until 2004, thereabouts. I have to go back to that mud picture.
The mud, oh, there's a lot of mud there.
Here we are hauling supplies to the top of the plateau of Devon Island, about 1,000 feet up, to get stuff up to the ice cap for the ice cap station. And unbelievably, this was early first week in September. And here we are 1,000 feet up in the air in the Arctic, 75 degrees north. And our tractors got bogged down in the mud. They could not pull the equipment through the mud. So we had to leave it there, 2 tractors and a bunch of oil drums and equipment until the following spring when everything is frozen. And then it was easy to get to the ice cap. But I was going to say that the station, the Arctic Institute, kept the station until about 2005, I think, when they turned it over to the Grisfjord Inuit Co-op for their own use.
Oh, okay, so it's still, the buildings are still there, are they? Do you
I
think?
presume so. I presume.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the first place I touched down in the Arctic. Well, I guess I was in Resolute Bay and we flew and landed at True Love. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. It's a beautiful spot. And I just want to go back to because this is maybe the first time I met you was when you came to the museum with this photograph of this triangular structure.
The triangular mid-passage, a TMP.
Yep. So, and you had with you a letter because you had found this. This is an archaeological site, and that you had found at True Love.
Yeah.
And I know you had written to Bob McGee about it.
Yeah.
And I think, do you want to talk about what he told you?
I can't really remember. I still have the correspondence with him, but I can't really remember what he told me about it. I think he may have been a bit vague about it. The only time I really understood what it is was when I saw the paper that you and a number of other people had written about these mid-passages in other parts of the Arctic.
Right. Well, and I know, go ahead. Yeah.
This picture was published in the Canadian magazine, The Beaver, from the Hudson Bay in 1964. Since they had helped to support the expedition, they wanted an article, and so I included this photograph in the article, which I wrote for them.
Well,
the orientation, did you see this one when you were there, Jenny?
Not when I was there. No, we didn't. It's down like Rocky Point area, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the thing that intrigued me was it seemed to point directly northward toward Ellesmere Island, which you can see in the background, over and toward a site that had been found to have what we now know was a polar bear trap. I think it was a polar bear trap on the shore of Jones Sound. So I think it was, for some reason, a Inuit indication of where that polar bear trap was, and presumably a village at the same time.
Yeah. And now we think that they're interior structures for tents or winter houses, because you see how all this, the big stones have been cleared away on either side, so the walls of the structure around it this way, and they're very rare. They're found in this one on Devon Island. We know about. There's some in Inglefield Land. We found quite a few. And then in just one small area of the Canadian Arctic, some Art Dyke and Jim Savell have found some. They're very rare, unusual features. So this was my introduction to them, which is pretty interesting.
Am I far wrong when I say that when we found this in 1962, it was one of the first to be found?
Oh, it was the first, as far as I know.
The first, so that's nice to know.
And
nobody knew nobody knew what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I love the photograph on the left too. The pattern. Yeah, that's about as clear an example of pattern of ground, which is frequently found in the Arctic, and but that's part of True Love lowland also.
Yes. I remember walking over that kind of ground.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of mud up there, I must say. And I don't know, I think, so that's that picture. So then you, and this was 1964. Did you go right from True Love up to Grisfjord?
No, this picture was taken in 1962, I think, when I made a trip from Devon Island to Grisfjord. I wanted to run an oceanographic station inside the fjord itself, Grisfjord, which you can see on the left, penetrating beyond the high peaked mountain there. So that was taken in 64, but in 62, I went back from Devon Island. I stayed out of the Arctic until 1969. I had to get a job and earn a living. So back until, this was 62.
Okay, so this is the first one, yeah.
Do you want a story about this picture?
Yeah, yeah.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Policeman at Greasefjord was very friendly and very hospitable. And he said, I will take you into Greasefjord with my dog team and help you run your oceanographic station. I said, wonderful. That's very much appreciated. I appreciate it. So we got in there and we drilled the hole and we set up the equipment in the tent and so forth so I could process the samples inside the tent. And we sent the sampling bottles down several hundred meters and brought them back up after waiting for the temperatures to come to equilibrium. And we were inside and I was ready to write down all the data from the sampling. And suddenly I realized that I did not have a pencil. I'd forgotten a pencil. And I said, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I can't tell Leon that I don't have a pencil. All his work for nothing. And I was groping around in my parka trying to find something. And he said, what's the matter? I said, well, I have to tell you, I don't have a pencil. And he said, oh, that's no problem. He said, use a bullet. And he pulled out a 30-06 from his rifle and he sharpened the end of the bullet. And he said, here, use this. And it worked fine.
You have to always be on your toes in the Arctic and use what's at hand for whatever you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So that's 1962.
And so, and then you went back in, this is,
This is 1963.
oh, okay.
You want a story about that?
Yes, because I think there's a beautiful photograph also to go with this.
Yeah, this is a skiff I used for sampling in the water in the ocean off Devon Island. Do you have a next picture? What's the
This
next?
one?
Okay,
Just the one? Yep.
here's the glacier that we were studying. And you can see it's almost a mirror image. You can turn that picture upside down and it looks exactly the same upside down as it does. Because on this particular day, when I took that skiff to this glacier, I had to deliver supplies to our glaciologist. It was absolutely cloudless, not a cloud in the sky. It was absolutely flat, no wind whatsoever. The sea was, as I say, like a mirror. And I went around in the skiff. It was about 35 miles, I think, to the glacier. And landed and talked with the glaciologist and gave him their supplies and then started home again. As I was starting home around Cape Sparbo, Cape Hardy, a bunch of ice floes had accumulated by the tide, by the drift. And so I was winding my way through the ice floes, between the ice floes. They were not very far apart, a little bit wider than the skiff itself. And I was staring into the sun, which was low in the west. And as I went around the corner between two ice floes, I saw what looked like a black ledge right between two ice floes, filling all the space between two ice floes. And I knew it wasn't a ledge. I said, oh my God, it's a walrus. And if I hit that walrus going full speed in this plywood skiff, there'll be nothing but splinters left. So fortunately, the walrus heard me at the same time that I saw him, and he began to dive. And the skiff went right up over the back of the walrus, knocked the outboard engine up in the air. I kept on going, slid down the other side, and kept on winding my way home, and finally got home after no more further incidents. That moment of seeing that walrus literally blocking my way, fortunately low in the water, fortunately beginning to dive so that I could literally slide up over his back. It lifted the boat out of the water, lifted the engine out of the water, and I was able to keep going. It happened in conditions like that.
Oh, yeah. There's so many close calls that make great stories,
Yes.
but at the time they have been pretty terrifying.
Well, coming back to 1969, which was my next trip.
Which I think there's, this is Fritz.
Oh, that's Fritz Kerner on the Devon Island ice cap.
I'm out of order. This 1969? Yeah.
This is 1969.
Yeah.
And I'm with Akiago, who was my assistant and great companion. He's another remarkable person that I met there. And so I was able to work in Grise Fjord again, making 4 oceanographic stations, and went on about 30 miles to South Cape Fjord and made 3 more oceanographic stations. My purpose in making these trips was to ascertain, verify, find out whether the glaciers were eroding, scraping, scouring minerals from the land into the sea that would enhance phytoplankton growth. It inferred to be the case in Northwest Greenland, and some measurements in the Antarctic suggested it. But these measurements show that it definitely occurred. And the interesting thing is that the glacier was scouring those minerals, nutrients, nitrate and silica, which were found in Devon Island, Jones Sound, to be most limiting for the phytoplankton. So that turned out to be very well. I hope you're going to show the next picture.
I don't know if I have them in the right order. Well, I'm making tea.
Well,
This one, this is yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
I was delighted when Science decided to publish the picture of the glacier on the front cover.
Yes.
The sad thing is that since then, 1973, I think it is, 71, can't read it. Yeah, that glacier has retreated 5 miles, probably more than 5 miles now.
Yeah.
If you took the same picture, you wouldn't see any ice there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And is that because we're gonna need to go to questions soon? But is this the data? Some of the data that you're continuing to publish on? Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more picture. One more publication.
Thanks. Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's me on the ice island.
Yeah. And I think that's the last one I've got.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alex Michaud, who's at the Bigelow Laboratory in Boothbay Harbor, got interested in data which I had about nutrients or oxygen and silica underneath the ice during winter in a lake next to our camp on Devon Island. And it's interesting. He called me up totally unexpectedly and said, you did some work on a glacier in the Arctic. And I said, yes, I did. And we got talk. He said, can you talk about it? And I said, sure, we'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
And, so we did. And then he said, I'm interested in frozen lakes. And I said, well, I've got some frozen lake data too. He said, wonderful. So he's working on getting that published right now. So that'll be the last of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a great testament to the quality of the research you were doing, and to how, these sort of data archives continue to be really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. That was so fantastic. We do have a few minutes for questions. And,
Sure.
I would just say by opening comment, I was thinking about sort of the theme of continuance here, right? Between MacMillan and the work you're doing, Spencer. And then, both of you in True Love, I'm just like, oh, that is so sweet. Like this, I have to know, like the island station, what is the background of True Love being the name for that?
What is the origin of True Love?
Yeah, the name.
True Love was the name of a ship that was built in Philadelphia in 1763. It was a privateer during the American Revolutionary War. Then it was bought by the English, and it was made into a whaling ship. And it went whaling in the Arctic, including right off our base site on Devon Island for 100 years, which is remarkable. I'm sure that it was so soaked in whale oil that it couldn't disintegrate for 100 years until the 1870s, I think it was. So
that's fantastic. Thank you. I just had to ask. I knew there must be some story behind that. So I wanted to just mention to the audience, we're being recorded. Since you have the capability, though, you can unmute yourself to ask a question. So if anyone has a question, you can just go ahead and unmute, and I'm going to try to change my view so I can see everyone, which doesn't seem possible. So I'm going to just say, go ahead and take a risk and assume you're not going to interrupt anyone.
This is Susan Hanna. I have a question for Spencer.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Spencer, I wondered if I was really intrigued by that triangular structure that you indicated could have been pointing to a camp or a polar bear trap location. And I wondered if you could say more about the dimensions of that. It was a little hard to tell from the photograph, as well as the picture on the left, the mounds in the ground. Could you just give us some size reference for those?
Yeah, Jenny could tell you better on the dimensions of the triangle. About 2 meters long, Jenny, and 1 meter wide. Is that
Generally, yeah.
close enough? Yeah, yeah. And the picture on the left with the pattern ground, how big were those?
Yes.
Less than 3 feet in diameter, 2.5 feet in diameter, approximately.
How much is known about the cause of those? What's the dynamic that leaves that pattern? That's really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And there are a number of different kinds of patterns in pattern ground in the Arctic, including true love lowland. And don't ask me, go to a soil geologist or to explain why that happens. Of course, it has to do with the freezing and the thawing over many, many years of why the ground takes those particular patterns probably depends upon the composition of the soil in the particular area. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, well, I'll look it up. I'll try to do some reading. That's intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, Caroline.
Yeah. Hi, Spencer. This is Caroline Mosley. I'm from Special Collections and Archives, and I'm the one who's working on processing your papers.
Yes.
Which is really fascinating. I was just wondering, you mentioned that the data that have been recently used by the scientists at Bigelow, is that the kind of material that people might find in the archives that you've given to us? Was that from published papers, the data that he was using? Or?
You'll have to say that again, please.
What the data that was recently used by the fellow at Bigelow, is that the kind of data that would be found in the papers that you've given to Special Collections and Archives?
It might be, yes. Perhaps not. I may have kept those, hoping that someday I would be able to get the data published.
You did. Yeah, you told me. I picked up the collection. I remember, Spencer, you mentioned you were going to hold on to some data because you were actively working on publishing.
Yeah, yeah. So it's probably at my home.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to let people know that Alex Michaud has put in the chat a PDF that compares the science cover, the picture of the glacier, with a contemporary picture, so you can see the retreat of the glacier.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex.
I also wanted to say that the pictures are fantastic. The slides, the color.
Good, good.
You know, they're really good quality. It gives a real feel for the place.
Yeah, good, yeah. I see Patty is on the screen there.
So I am another one of Spencer's co-authors of some of this historical data. Spencer one day in the, I don't know, 2008 or so, something like that, arrived in my office with the box of papers and some folders and whatever, and he had plotted some of the data and said, would you want this? And I look at the data, look at the numbers, and I said, yeah, I'll plot the data with new software to journals, but you write the paper. And so I snowed him under the most recent literature. I mean, some of those data were unpublished, 1958, 1956, T3 data. And some of the very first primary production data in the Arctic. And so we did several publications. I kept asking him, what journal did you always want to publish in? He said, Marine Biology. I said, you got it, we're going to get it in there. But most recently, just in 2020, there was a review of what we call under ice or sub-ice algal blooms, something that we've seen in one of the papers that I wrote with Spencer was specifically because folks said, oh, this is a new phenomenon. And Spencer said, no, it's not. So we went and looked for other data, submarine data and stuff like that, from the 60s and the 70s and all that, to show that while we didn't have biological data, we could use chemical data to infer what it was. Well, now that the Arctic sea ice is melting and all of this and the ships can get in, there are numerous reports of large phytoplankton activity under the ice. And so there were two review papers. And one of those review papers, the lead figure number one, is one based on Spencer's original 1950 something data, published with some others. And because once we published, we made those data publicly available in a variety of collections. And so it's just spectacular because, I repeat myself, those are some of the very first data sets. The beauty is that it is a seasonal sampling. So as he said, he was there for the entire year. Those type of data just don't exist. None of us get funded really to be there for that length of time. And there are no time series for the Arctic. And for the most part, like there are for the Antarctic, because it's just such a harsh place to be. So there you go. And indeed, so Alex has his own story about how this all came to be. And I'm just, okay, your turn, Alex.
I guess my addition to this would just be to underscore Patty's comments about how groundbreaking these data are and the observations that Spencer has made even today. I was studying the influences of glaciers on the marine ecosystem, and I thought I had novel observations, only to find Spencer's 1973 paper, and thinking, and I found this paper when I was working in Denmark. And I thought, East Booth Bay, where is that? And then I ended up taking a position at Bigelow, and so I just can't highlight enough how ahead of their time these data were, to think about making these measurements that people just didn't consider making. And so to establish a station like that and make these measurements was pretty special.
I would like to mention, Jenny, you asked me about special people that I met during this work. I have to say that Patty is certainly part of that list. She took an early interest in my data, and she made it possible for me to, and we published together jointly a lot of those data, including some of the new views of what the data was saying and implying. For example, our second paper, Patty, about the drawdowns of nitrates because of the photosynthesis of sea ice algae. So add her to the list of special people. And when Alex got his paper published, add him to the list too.
Oh,
Well, thank you so much. I see we're at time. I just, the archivists in the crowd, we're super thankful for Alex and Patty speaking up about the relevance of the data, because this is the kind of thing we like to be able to integrate into the description of the collection. And it's, Spencer, if I've learned anything, is incredibly understated about all of his accomplishments. So it's really nice to hear from others about the continuing value and impact of this data. So thank you both for speaking up. And Jenny and Spencer, what a great conversation. There's so many things I wanted to ask you about. So I hope we'll have a chance to be able to continue the conversation at some other point. And thanks to you all for joining us. It's been really wonderful, and apologies for the technical problems, but we persevered and had a really fabulous time together. So thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. Appreciate it very much. This is Jim Sharp at the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum. Are you, perhaps I should ask Jenny, are you recording this now and will it be on YouTube?
yes,
Yes.
it is being recorded and it will get put up.
I
Yeah.
signed in a little late and I missed some of the scintillating conversation, so I want to be sure and get it on YouTube. Thank you, Spence.
Thank you, Jim. I should mention Jim is the reason I was able to make a voyage with him on the Bowdoin from Maine to Provincetown in, what year was that, Jim?
Oh gosh, now you're asking me things. That's ancient history.
1969, I think it was.
69,
Oh,
ancient
yeah,
history. We were all
Jim,
young men.
Jim made the voyage to return the Bowdoin so that Donald MacMillan could see it from his front porch in Provincetown at the time. So we got there about a year before the admiral passed away. And so there are many other obligations that I have to Jim also. Thank you, Jim.
Boy, sure, Spencer. Pleasure knowing you.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer.
Jenny, thank you, Jenny, and thanks to Leslie for solving our problem. Thanks to Liz also.
Yes, thanks to Leslie. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.